In this lesson, I will be teaching you about two types of patterns. The patterns we will be learning about are repeating and growing patterns. This is a brief run-through of what we will be learning in this lesson. We're going to be learning the definition of repeating patterns, examples of repeating patterns, definition of growing patterns, and examples of growing patterns. We're also going to differentiate between growing and repeating patterns after the end of this lesson. First off, have you ever realized that some things or objects have a way of being in a sequence that you can predict what will be displayed next? This is a perfect example of a pattern. I think it's important that we learn the basic definition or review of a pattern so we can accurately describe repeating and growing patterns. A simplified definition of a pattern is a grouping or sequence that recurs. They are predictable, like I said before, and you always know what is coming next. Other places you may find patterns are in nature, the classroom, and art, and many more places. Here's an example of a pattern that we may see every day. The windows and the balconies repeat, and you know what object comes next, either going from side to side or up and down. Now that we have covered the basic definition of a pattern, I would like to teach you a specific type of pattern. One type of pattern is called a repeating pattern. This pattern is one of the easier to identify. Basically, one sequence or grouping will be shown and then continue to repeat through the whole pattern. The pattern never changes. The sequence can consist of one or many things or objects. The sequence has to repeat at least once to be considered a repeating pattern, and it can include many items. The examples we're going to be working with the items will be numbers, shapes, and colors. Like I stated before, a repeating pattern can be made from numbers. This pattern can have as little as one number, such as 1, 1, 1, 1, or many numbers, such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. And what comes next? That would be the 5. A repeating shape pattern is just like a number pattern. It can consist of one shape, and here's an example of triangle, triangle, triangle. We can predict that the next objects in these sequences will be triangle. Or it can have many shapes, such as triangle, square, circle, triangle, square, circle, triangle, square, circle. Because we know it's going to repeat the same sequence, and the repeating sequence is triangle, square, circle, we know the next sequence will be triangle, square, circle. Now that we have repeating color patterns have the same criteria as shape and number patterns. Repeating colors patterns are easy to see. The example I use one with 3 colors, blue, green, orange, and one with 4 colors, blue, orange, green, purple, blue, orange, green, purple, blue, orange, green, purple. They can also have one color or many more colors than just 4. Now that we have understood what a repeating pattern is, we are going to go over a growing pattern. A growing pattern is one that increases every sequence. What this means is every time the original sequence is repeated, an item or object will be added to the end of the repeating pattern. This pattern is constantly growing. It doesn't remain the same, hence why it's called a growing pattern. This can occur also, just like the repeating pattern, in nature, classroom, or art, and many other places. Just like the repeating pattern, a growing pattern can be made up of numbers. This pattern can start with just one number, such as this example. It goes 1, which is the original sequence, and then the next sequence is 1, 2, and a 2 was added to the original sequence, and then you take that sequence and state it again, 1, 2, and then you add another object or number in this case, and that's 3. So it goes 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A growing pattern can be created from shapes as well. Just like the growing number pattern, a shape is added to every sequence and it can start out with just one shape. Shapes can be harder to see than a pattern, but it is exactly the same as number patterns. In this example, it starts with a rectangle and then a triangle. Then it is repeated and a circle is added. Then that sequence, rectangle, triangle, circle, is repeated, and then a rhombus is added. You can see it grow. The next sequence could possibly be rectangle, triangle, circle, rhombus, and then we could add a parallelogram, or whatever other shape we would want to add to this example. Growing color pattern is just like a growing shape and growing number pattern, but now the sequence is made up of colors. A color is added to every sequence to make the pattern grow. It can start with just one color, like the example on the slide. This just starts with purple. The purple is repeated and the green is added. Then that sequence, purple-green, is repeated and grows with blue added to it, and it continues to grow and the red is added at the next sequence. You can literally see it grow and lengthen. So now that we have a good idea of what repeating and growing patterns are, let's review and differentiate between the two. Repeating patterns remain the same. They are predictable because the same sequence is stated and then repeated over and over. Nothing is ever being added to it and the pattern stays constant. A growing pattern, on the other hand, changes. An original sequence is stated, and then when it is repeated, another item or object is added to the original sequence. It is still predictable, but it is always growing. So now that we've got the gist of repeating and growing pattern, we're going to do a few examples together as a class. Here's an example of a pattern. The pattern goes circle, square, triangle, circle, square, triangle, circle. So, what kind of pattern would you say this is? Repeating shape pattern is correct. What shapes that will complete the last sequence after circle? Square, triangle is correct. Now here's another pattern. This pattern goes blue, yellow, green, blue, yellow, green, red. What type of pattern is this? Growing color pattern is correct. What would be the next sequence in this? Blue, yellow, green, red, and then we could add our own color, dark blue, or we could add a purple, or we could add a green, as long as it grows. So now that we have the gist of this and we've worked together as a class, I would like you guys to make your own patterns individually, and I'll come around and collect those. For the first one, I want you to create your own repeating pattern using shapes and create your own growing pattern using numbers. I'll leave this slide up for you to look at, and if you have any questions, please let me know.